Fresh spices here, best prices in the market.
Beautiful textiles, get yours now.
How much for this one?
Your wealth is built on stolen ground, my son. The spirits know who you really are.
At one time, the world spoke the CEO's name with respect. News channels praised his sharp mind. Business magazines placed his face on glossy covers. Investors trusted him. Employees admired him. To the public, he was the symbol of success, calm, confident, untouchable. From the top floor of his glass tower, the city looked small beneath him. Cars moved like tiny insects. People hurried through streets that no longer felt real to him. He had climbed higher than he ever imagined, higher than anyone from his past believed he could go. But behind the polished smile and tailored suits, pressure lived quietly. Every decision carried weight. Every mistake had consequences. Sleep came late, if at all. The phone never stopped ringing. Trust was rare, and silence followed him everywhere. Even in crowded rooms, he often felt alone. Success demanded sacrifices. He told himself it was worth it. Late nights replaced family dinners. Meetings replaced friendships. Values were bent, then slowly broken, all in the name of growth. Each compromise felt small at first, easy to ignore, easier to justify. After all, this was how power worked. Then everything changed. It began as a whisper, a leaked document, a quiet accusation, a headline that appeared online before sunrise. By noon, the story was everywhere. News anchors spoke his name with disbelief. Social media turned cruel. What once sounded like praise now carried anger and doubt. The boardroom filled with tension. Faces that once smiled now avoided eye contact. Lawyers spoke in rushed voices. Executives shifted blame, protecting themselves. No one stood beside him. By evening, the whispers became shouts. Sponsors pulled out. Shares dropped fast. Employees feared for their jobs. Protesters gathered outside the building, holding signs that accused him of greed, lies, and betrayal. He watched it all unfold from his office window, frozen. The same people who once applauded his success now demanded his fall. The world he built with years of effort began to crumble in a single day. Every achievement felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Inside, panic grew. He replayed past decisions in his mind, moments he chose profit over people, silence over truth. He wondered which choice had pushed everything over the edge, or if the fall had always been waiting for him. Night came, but rest did not. Phones stopped ringing. Messages went unanswered. The building emptied. One by one, the lights went off across the floor, until only his office remained lit. He stood alone in the silence. The city outside no longer looked small. It looked distant, cold, unforgiving. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, not anger, not pride, but fear. Fear of losing everything. Fear of being exposed. Fear that without his title, without his power, there was nothing left. His reflection stared back at him through the glass. Successful, yes, but tired, hollow, and unsure. The fall had begun. And there was no one left to catch him. The silence in the office felt heavier than any noise he had known before. The CEO sat alone, his jacket draped over the back of his chair, his tie loosened like it was choking him. The same office that once made him feel powerful now felt empty and cold. Awards lined the walls. Framed magazine covers stared back at him like memories from another life. He closed his eyes, and the past began to surface. He remembered where it all started, not in glass towers or luxury cars, but in small rooms filled with big dreams. He was once hungry, determined, and hopeful. He believed success would fix everything. He believed money would bring peace. He believed power would earn love. To climb higher, he learned to move fast and feel less. He missed birthdays. He skipped anniversaries. Phone calls from family went unanswered, always delayed by important meetings. Friends slowly stopped inviting him places. At first, he told himself it was temporary. Later, he told himself it didn't matter. But it did. His marriage suffered quietly. Conversations turned short, then rare. The person who once believed in him more than anyone else began to feel like a stranger. When the relationship finally broke, he buried the pain under work and applause. Success kept coming, but something inside him was fading. Empathy became a weakness he couldn't afford. Trust became a risk he avoided. He surrounded himself with people who praised him, not people who challenged him. He listened more to numbers than to voices. Slowly he stopped seeing faces, only results. Now all of it was coming back. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Another distance created. A longtime partner stepping away until things settle. A close advisor resigning for personal reasons. People he trusted were protecting themselves. He understood them. That hurt the most. Anger rose inside him, followed by shame. He wanted to blame someone, anyone. The media. His rivals. The system. But deep down he knew he had played his part. He stood up and walked toward the window, pressing his hand against the glass. The city lights blurred as his eyes filled with something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Regret. He asked himself a question that scared him more than the scandal itself. Who am I without this title? Without the company, without the influence, without the respect of strangers? What was left? The answer did not come. His reflection looked older now. Tired. The confident posture was gone, replaced by a man carrying invisible weight. He had spent years building a life that impressed others, yet failed to build one that could support him when everything fell apart. For the first time he felt truly alone. No assistant knocking. No meetings waiting. No praise to lean on. Just him. And the truth he had avoided. Despite all the wealth, he had no peace. Despite all the power, he felt powerless. Despite having everything people dream of, he had nothing that truly grounded him. He sank into his chair, his head in his hands. The crisis outside continued to grow, but inside, something deeper was breaking. Not his career, his identity. The man he thought he was no longer existed, and the man he had become felt unfamiliar. He realized then that success had never promised happiness. It only distracted him from asking the right questions. And now, with everything slipping away, he was being forced to face them. The night stretched on, quiet and unforgiving. Somewhere far below, life continued, people laughing, arguing, surviving. He was surrounded by millions, yet felt unseen. He didn't know it yet, but this emptiness was preparing him. Preparing him to see what he had ignored. Preparing him to meet someone who lived without power, but understood life far better than he ever had. And soon their paths would cross. Morning arrived without ceremony. The city woke up in a rush, but the man on the street had already been awake for hours. Sleep never came easily when the ground was your bed and the cold air your blanket. He rose slowly from the corner where he spent the night, folding his worn jacket with care, as if it still mattered how things were kept. To most people passing by, he was invisible. They walked around him, not at him. I stayed forward. Faces remained closed. Some showed discomfort, others annoyance, but few showed curiosity. He had learned not to expect much. Survival taught him that hope must be quiet. His days followed a simple rhythm. Find water. Find food. Find shade. Protect what little he owned. He avoided trouble and kept his head low. Pride had no place here, but dignity still did. Once, his life looked very different. There was a time when his hands were clean and steady, when he woke up in a warm room with purpose waiting for him. He had a job he took pride in, one that required skill and care. People relied on him. He paid his bills. He planned for the future. He was known. He was respected. But life has a way of turning without warning. A series of wrong turns, some his fault, some not, slowly pulled the ground from beneath him. A workplace betrayal. A sudden loss. A promise broken by someone he trusted. When the job disappeared, everything else followed. Bills piled up. Friends grew distant. Support faded faster than he imagined. He searched for help, but doors closed one by one. By the time he reached the street, shame had already done its damage. Asking for help felt harder than hunger. He learned to swallow pride the way he swallowed pain, quietly. Yet something inside him refused to disappear. He watched people. Really watched them. From his place near the sidewalk, he observed the world in fragments. The way parents rushed their children. The way couples argued without listening. The way success wore confidence like armor. He noticed sadness hiding behind expensive clothes and fear behind angry faces. People thought he had nothing, but he carried something rare, clarity. Hardship had stripped away illusions. He knew what mattered because he had lost almost everything else. Kindness was no longer a word, it was a choice he made every day. He shared when he could. He stayed gentle when the world was not. Some nights, he stared up at the sky and remembered who he used to be. The pain came, but so did acceptance. He did not hate the world. He did not curse those who ignored him. He understood them. Everyone was fighting something unseen. When the city grew loud, he grew quiet. When life became cruel, he became patient. He had learned that anger only deepened wounds. People assumed he was broken. They were wrong. He had been bent, reshaped, and humbled, but not emptied. Wisdom had found him where comfort never could. And though his life looked small to others, his thoughts reached far. He believed that people crossed paths for reasons they rarely understood. That moments, even small ones, carried weight. That pain, when faced honestly, could teach lessons no success ever would. He didn't know whose life he might touch or when. He only knew that his presence still mattered, even if no one said it out loud. As the day moved forward, footsteps passed him like waves. Among them walked men in suits, women on phones, faces tense with worry. He noticed one figure slow down, not today but soon. A man carrying more than a briefcase. A man weighed down by something heavier than hunger. Their worlds had never touched before, but they were moving toward the same moment. And when they met, neither would leave unchanged. The city moved the same way it always did, fast, loud, uncaring. The CEO walked without direction, his phone silent in his pocket for the first time in years. He had left the office early, unable to breathe inside those glass walls anymore. The streets felt safer than the silence waiting for him upstairs. His suit was still perfect. His shoes still shined. Yet something about him had changed. His shoulders were heavier, his steps slower, as if the weight of the world pressed down on him with every move. People passed him without recognition. The headlines had already moved on to the next update, the next rumor. He was no longer the center of attention. For the first time he blended in. That frightened him. He stopped near a small park, resting on a bench that felt colder than expected. His thoughts raced, then crashed into each other. He stared ahead, not really seeing anything. That was when he noticed the man sitting a short distance away. The homeless man sat calmly, his belongings tucked close, his eyes following the movement of people instead of judging them. He didn't ask for money. He didn't speak. He simply existed. At first, the CEO barely registered him. To him, the man was part of the city's background, like streetlights or cracked sidewalks. A life he had learned to ignore without thinking. Minutes passed. The CEO rubbed his temples, letting out a slow breath. His face tightened, his composure slipping. The mask he wore for years had grown too heavy to hold. The homeless man noticed. He saw the tension in the CEO's jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched, the distant look of someone fighting a storm inside their own mind. He recognized it, not from wealth or power but from loss. Pain had a familiar shape. Their eyes met for just a moment. The CEO looked away first, uncomfortable. He felt exposed, like someone had seen past his clothes, past his status, straight into the cracks he worked so hard to hide. Silence settled between them. The city noise filled the space where words could have been spoken. Cars passed. Footsteps echoed. A child laughed somewhere nearby. The homeless man shifted slightly and picked up a small coin from the ground, rolling it between his fingers. He studied it, then held it out toward the CEO, not offering it, just showing it. "Strange thing," he said softly, more to the air than to the man beside him. "How something so small can feel heavy depending on what it costs you." The CEO froze. The words weren't sharp. They weren't accusing. They landed gently but deep. He didn't respond. He didn't know how. The homeless man gave a faint nod as if he understood. He returned the coin to his palm and looked back toward the street. The moment passed. The CEO stood up soon after, straightening his jacket out of habit. As he walked away, he reached into his pocket and pulled out some money. He paused, then placed it on the bench where the man sat, not out of charity but instinct. The homeless man didn't look at the money. Instead, he spoke again quietly. "Careful," he said. "Not all losses show right away." The CEO stopped walking. He turned, but the man was already looking ahead, his attention back on the world as it moved around them. No judgment. No expectation. Just awareness. The CEO walked on, his heart beating faster than before. He didn't understand why that brief exchange stayed with him. Why those simple words felt heavier than the headlines screaming his name. Why a stranger with nothing seemed to see more than those who had everything. That night, as the city lights flickered on, he realized something had shifted. The encounter meant nothing. And somehow it meant everything. The seed had been planted. The morning brought no relief. The CEO woke to a phone buzzing endlessly on the nightstand. Missed calls. Voicemails. Alerts. His name filled the screen, surrounded by words like investigation, fraud, resignation. The scandal had grown teeth overnight. By the time he reached the office, reporters crowded the entrance. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions he wasn't ready to answer. Security rushed him inside as if he were a criminal, not the man who once welcomed guests through the front door with confidence. Inside, chaos ruled. Lawyers spoke quickly, using careful language that avoided hope. Financial officers reported numbers that sank lower with every sentence. Investors demanded answers. The board scheduled an emergency meeting without asking his opinion. He sat there listening, nodding, barely breathing. Every solution came with a cost. Every defense revealed another weakness. The company he built now felt like a trap closing around him. Then came the legal notice. An official investigation. Potential charges. The kind of words that didn't fade with time. His name would follow them forever. By afternoon, the stock collapsed further. News channels ran his face beside red arrows pointing down. Commentators questioned his character. Strangers judged his entire life based on pieces of a story they barely understood. Friends stopped calling. Colleagues who once laughed with him avoided the hallways when he passed. Employees whispered. Emails arrived filled with polite distance, ending with lines like "for now" and "until further notice." Even his family pulled away, not out of hate but fear. Fear of being dragged into the storm. Fear of standing beside a man the world had already decided to tear down. That night, he sat alone in his apartment, lights off, watching the city glow through the window. The room felt too quiet. His mind ran in circles. He replayed mistakes. Imagined escape. Thought about resigning, disappearing, letting someone else clean up the mess. He wondered if surrender would hurt less than fighting. For the first time, he questioned if he was strong enough to face what was coming. The knock at the door startled him. When he opened it, no one stood there. Only silence and a folded paper placed carefully on the floor. He picked it up, confused. No name. No signature. Just a few simple words written in steady handwriting. Running only changes where the pain waits. His chest tightened. He knew the handwriting. Later that evening, he found himself back at the park, drawn there without understanding why. The city was colder now, the air sharper. The bench where he had sat days earlier stood empty. Then he saw him. The homeless man sat near the same spot, his posture calm as if nothing in the world could rush him. The CEO approached slowly, unsure of what he expected. "You left that," the CEO said, holding up the note. The man nodded gently. "Thought you might need it." They sat in silence for a moment. The CEO stared at the ground. "I don't see a way out," he admitted quietly. The words surprised him as much as they sounded weak. The man didn't answer right away. He looked out at the street, watching people pass. "Most people don't," he said at last. "Not when they're standing inside the storm." The CEO let out a shaky breath. "Everything's gone. My work, my name, people I trusted." The man turned to him. His eyes were steady, kind, and honest. "You still have yourself," he said. "That's more than you think." The CEO laughed bitterly. "I don't even know who that is anymore." The man nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Then maybe this isn't the end," he said softly. "Maybe it's the part where you finally meet him." The words stayed with the CEO as the night deepened. For the first time since the scandal broke, someone wasn't trying to fix his problem. They weren't selling hope or offering excuses. They were offering perspective. And somehow that felt heavier and more real than any legal advice he had received. As he stood to leave, the man spoke once more. "Pain closes doors," he said. "But truth opens different ones." The CEO walked away slowly, the weight in his chest shifting, not lifting but changing. He still had no escape. But he no longer felt completely alone. The city was quieter that evening, as if it too had grown tired of shouting. The CEO returned to the park again, not because he expected answers, but because something inside him needed stillness. The noise of lawyers, media, and panic had drained him. Here, under dim streetlights and open sky, his thoughts could finally breathe. The homeless man was there. He sat on the same bench, hands folded, eyes calm. He didn't look surprised to see the CEO. It was as if he had been waiting, not for a person but for the moment. They sat side by side, the distance between them small, but the worlds they came from still wide. "You come here often," the CEO said quietly. The man smiled faintly. "It's a good place to remember who you are." The CEO looked at him, confused. "How do you do that?" he asked. "When everything you worked for disappears overnight?" The man took a slow breath. "By asking what you worked for in the first place." The words settled heavily. The CEO felt something shift inside him, Not comfort, not relief, but recognition. For years he had chased outcomes, not purpose. He had measured his worth in numbers and titles, not in impact. I made choices, the CEO said, his voice low. Some of them hurt people. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself everyone does it. The man nodded. We all tell ourselves stories, he said. The dangerous ones are the stories that help us sleep while others stay awake because of us. The CEO swallowed hard. The man continued, his voice calm but firm. Failure taught me something success never did, he said. It taught me to face myself without applause. He spoke of loss, not as a complaint but as a lesson. Of trusting the wrong people. Of staying silent when he should have spoken. Of how one moment of fear changed the path of his life forever. I lost my job because I refused to lie, the man said simply. I thought truth would protect me. It didn't. Not right away. The CEO turned toward him fully now, listening. But it gave me something better later, the man continued. It gave me peace. I knew who I was even when I had nothing else. The CEO felt exposed. His success had come from knowing how to bend truth, how to hide consequences behind progress. Now those same choices were chasing him. What's the gift? The CEO asked softly. The thing you think I'm missing. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper worn from time. He opened it carefully. It was a copy of an old report, one the CEO recognized instantly. It was proof. Evidence from years ago. A decision buried deep inside company history. A moment when the CEO had signed off on something he knew wasn't right, choosing speed over safety, silence over responsibility. You knew this would come back, the man said gently. You just hoped it wouldn't find you. The CEO's heart pounded. I was there, the man continued. Not as someone important. Just someone who noticed. I kept this not for revenge, but because truth has a way of waiting. The gift wasn't money. It wasn't rescue. It was truth. You can still hide, the man said. People will believe you. Power makes lies comfortable. The CEO closed his eyes. He knew it was true. But you could also stand up, the man said. Name the mistake. Take the weight. Protect those who can't protect themselves. That would destroy what's left of me, the CEO whispered. The man shook his head. It will destroy who you were, he said. Not who you can be. Silence wrapped around them. The CEO realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. Saving his career wouldn't come from defending it. It would come from exposing it. Redemption required cost. I don't know if I'm brave enough, the CEO admitted. The man looked at him with quiet certainty. Bravery isn't loud, he said. It's just honest. As the CEO stood to leave, the man handed him the paper. That's the gift, he said. What you do with it is yours. The CEO walked away slowly, heart racing, carrying more than evidence. He carried a choice. The paper felt heavier than it should have. The CEO sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at the worn document in front of him. Dawn crept in through the window, painting the room in pale light. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces, employees, families, strangers, people affected by choices he once called necessary. He knew what the paper could do. If he stayed silent, lawyers could bury it. The company might survive. His name could be slowly cleaned, reshaped, softened by time and money. He could protect what remained of his life. If he spoke, everything would change. Fear tightened his chest. He imagined the headlines, the board's anger, the legal consequences, the way people would look at him, not as a fallen hero but as a man who admitted his guilt. Pride screamed at him to stay quiet. Survival demanded it. He reached for his phone, then stopped. For years, he had run from moments like this, moments that asked him to choose between comfort and conscience. This time, there was nowhere left to hide. He thought of the homeless man's words. It will destroy who you were, not who you can be. The CEO folded the paper carefully and stood up. The emergency board meeting was already tense when he arrived. Faces were tight. Voices were sharp. Strategies focused on defense, delay, and damage control. When it was his turn to speak, the room fell silent. He didn't follow the script they prepared for him. Instead, he placed the document on the table. I'm here to tell the truth, he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Shock rippled across the room. He spoke slowly, choosing honesty over polish. He explained the decision made years ago. The warnings ignored. The harm caused. He didn't shift blame. He didn't hide behind policy or pressure. He owned it. Some board members protested. Others stared in disbelief. A few looked relieved, like they had been waiting for someone to finally say it out loud. By the time he finished, the room felt smaller. "I'm ready to face the consequences," he said. "Because protecting this company means protecting the people it serves, not my position." Silence followed. That afternoon he stepped in front of cameras again, but this time without excuses, without lawyers whispering in his ear. He spoke plainly. He apologized. He acknowledged pain. He promised cooperation. The reaction was immediate. Critics attacked him harder. Some called it a stunt. Others said it was too late. The legal risks grew. His resignation was demanded by some, praised by others. Inside he felt strangely calm. For the first time in years he wasn't pretending. The days that followed were brutal. Investigations expanded. Financial losses deepened. Old allies disappeared completely. There were moments he questioned if he had made a mistake. But then something unexpected happened. Employees began to speak up, not in anger but in support. Victims of the decision he admitted to came forward, not to destroy him, but to tell their stories openly for the first time. The conversation changed. He had chosen integrity over survival, and while it cost him dearly, it also opened a door that had long been locked. Late one evening, as he walked past the park again, he saw the bench empty. The homeless man was gone. The CEO stood there for a moment, wondering if he would ever see him again. Wondering if the man knew what his words had done. He whispered a quiet thank you into the night. The risk had been taken. Now all that remained was to see where the truth would lead. Truth moved slower than scandal, but it moved deeper. In the days after the CEO's confession, the noise did not stop. News panels debated his motives. Comment sections burned with anger and doubt. Some called him brave. Others called him reckless. The world was not ready to forgive so quickly. But something had shifted beneath the surface. Investigators now worked with clarity instead of resistance. Reports became more honest. Testimonies once buried were finally heard. The story was no longer about rumors, it was about facts. And facts had weight. The CEO no longer hid behind statements written by others. He showed up. He listened. He answered difficult questions without defensiveness. When he didn't know something, he admitted it. When he was wrong, he said so. People noticed. Not all at once. Not loudly. But steadily. Employees who once feared losing their jobs now spoke with cautious pride. They saw a leader willing to stand in the fire instead of pushing others into it. Trust, once shattered, began to rebuild, slowly, carefully. The public tone began to soften. The headlines changed. Words like cover-up faded, replaced by accountability and transparency. Former critics admitted that something rare was happening, a powerful person choosing responsibility over reputation. The company's losses did not vanish overnight. But the bleeding slowed. Investors who believed in long-term value returned. Partners who respected integrity reopened conversations. Truth was not saving the company. Character was. One evening, after another long day of testimony, the CEO walked through the city again. This time he walked with intention, not escape. He felt lighter, not because the burden was gone, but because he was no longer carrying it alone. He stopped at the park. The bench was there. The same streetlights. The same passing footsteps. The homeless man sat nearby, feeding birds with crumbs. The CEO approached slowly, unsure if he should speak. The man looked up and smiled gently. "You chose," the man said. "I did," the CEO replied. "And I don't know where it leads." The man nodded. That's how truth works. It doesn't promise comfort. It promises direction. They sat together, watching the birds scatter and return. "They're listening now," the CEO said quietly. "People. The company. Even those who hated me. They always listen," the man replied. "They just wait to see if the words are real." The CEO exhaled. "You didn't stay," he said, "after I made the choice." The man shrugged. "This wasn't my story to finish. Just one to help start." For the first time, the CEO truly understood the gift. It wasn't the document. It wasn't the advice. It was the mirror the man held up, forcing him to see himself clearly. As days passed, change continued. Policies shifted. Oversight improved. Decisions once made behind closed doors were now shared openly. The culture inside the company began to transform, not driven by fear but by responsibility. The CEO no longer led from above. He led from within. Public opinion did not become praise overnight, but respect replaced rage. People saw effort, not perfection. And that mattered. One afternoon, a journalist asked him, "Do you think honesty saved your career?" The CEO paused before answering. "No," he said. "It saved my life." That night, as he stood by his window once more, the city looked different. Not smaller. Not weaker. More human. He knew challenges still waited ahead. Consequences still needed to be faced. But he also knew this: whatever remained would be built on truth. And that truth had changed everything. Redemption did not arrive as applause. It came quietly, through small moments that carried more meaning than any award ever had. The CEO's career did not return to what it once was, and he did not want it to. The title remained, but the power behind it felt different now. Meetings began with questions, not commands. Decisions were slower, heavier, and shared. He listened more than he spoke. And people noticed. Employees who once feared speaking up now raised concerns without hesitation. Systems were rebuilt. Safeguards strengthened. The company began to stand for something beyond profit. Trust, once broken, was being earned back, step by step. The CEO found purpose in that work. For the first time, leadership felt human. One afternoon he requested something unusual. A review of overlooked cases, former workers, contractors, and partners affected by past decisions. Not for damage control but for repair. Compensation was offered where possible. Apologies were given where money could not fix what was lost. Each story humbled him. He no longer measured success by growth charts, but by the harm prevented and the lives protected. Then there was the man. The homeless man still sat at the park bench some evenings, feeding birds, watching the city breathe. His life had not changed overnight either, but something new had entered it. People had started to notice him. Not because he asked to be seen, but because someone finally looked. The CEO returned often, not as a savior but as a listener. They spoke of life, of loss, of choices. Sometimes they spoke of nothing at all. One evening the CEO brought news. "There's a place," he said gently. "Not charity. Or a chance." The man studied him for a long moment. "No favors?" he asked. "Only fairness," the CEO replied. The man nodded. The transition was not easy. Pride battled fear. Trust took time. But slowly the man's days changed. A warm room replaced cold pavement. Purpose replaced survival. His skills, long ignored, found use again. He did not forget the street. He volunteered. He spoke quietly to those still unseen. He helped others the way he once helped the CEO, without force, without judgment. 2 lives had crossed. 2 paths had shifted. Their relationship changed as well. It was no longer built on imbalance. They walked side by side, equals in respect, different only in experience. The CEO often thought about who he used to be. A man who believed power was protection. A man who thought success made him untouchable. Now he understood the truth. Character was what remained when everything else was stripped away. One evening, as the sun set behind the buildings, the CEO and the man stood together, watching the city lights flicker on. "You saved my career," the CEO said quietly. The man shook his head. "You saved it yourself," he replied. "I just reminded you who you were before the noise." The CEO smiled, a real smile this time. Their transformation wasn't dramatic. It was honest. An honesty they had learned changed lives. The city slept beneath a blanket of quiet lights, and the CEO stood by his office window, looking down at the streets he once thought so small. He remembered the first day he arrived at the top, the exhilaration, the applause, the sense of power that made him feel untouchable. And now, after everything, he understood something far more profound. Success, he realized, had never been about wealth or status. It had been about how much of himself he was willing to invest honestly, how much he cared for others even when it was inconvenient, how he responded when the world demanded a choice between comfort and conscience. The homeless man, the one whose life seemed so far removed from his own, had given him a gift no title or paycheck ever could. Not money. Not connections. Not advice in a polished envelope. The gift was perspective. A reminder that true value is measured not in the applause of the crowd, but in courage, empathy, and the ability to face yourself with honesty. He thought of the countless people the company affected. Employees, customers, families, communities. He realized that leadership was not a shield for himself, but a responsibility to those whose lives intersected with his decisions. The true measure of success was no longer in quarterly reports or media praise, but in the lives he could touch, protect, and uplift. He thought of the man on the street again. A life forgotten by most, yet rich with wisdom and integrity. The man had endured hardship without losing his humanity, offering a lesson the CEO could not ignore. It struck him how society often overlooks those with the least power, even though their voices carry the most truth. Sometimes the greatest teachers are found in the quiet corners, unnoticed but profound. A deep sense of gratitude filled him, not for what he had regained but for what he had learned. For the first time in years he felt grounded, connected, and awake. Fear no longer dictated his choices. Reflection and conscience did. He understood that falling from the top was necessary, not to punish him but to awaken him. The CEO knew now that he could build differently. Not for fame, not for numbers, not for headlines, but for people. And in doing so he could inspire others, not by the power he wielded but by the character he displayed. As he turned from the window he felt a quiet hope. Change was possible. Redemption was possible. Life could be rebuilt not just for himself but for others. The homeless man had given him more than advice. He had given him clarity, courage, and a vision of what truly mattered. The CEO realized that in losing everything he had gained the most important thing of all, himself. A self that could lead with integrity, live with compassion, and measure success not by what he had, but by the difference he could make. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, unaware of the transformation that had occurred within one man's heart. But the CEO no longer needed recognition. The quiet knowledge that he could act rightly even when it was difficult was the true reward. And in that realization he finally understood. Success is not defined by status, power, or wealth, but by character, courage, and the ability to act with humanity. The night held promise. The streets held life. And the man who had once been lost in his own ambition now stood awake, ready to live fully, responsibly, and with purpose.